University, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Latin American Studies program. So Villanova is a university that's a Catholic Augustinian community of higher education committed to excellence and extension in the exploration, dissemination, and application of knowledge. At the core of the university's mission resides the interest in nurturing its members' concerns for the common good. In this way, our institution encourages its members, students, faculty, and staff to explore, learn, and share strategies that help us become responsible and productive citizens whose efforts are invested in building a just and peaceful world. This is why the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Villanova support programs and initiatives that fosters active engagement, critical thinking, lifelong learning and moral reflection, but also creates an open, intellectually stimulating and culturally diverse environment that supports individual differences and insists that mutual love and respect should animate every aspect of life. Our institution encourages students, faculty, and staff to engage in service experiences and research both locally and globally, so they learn from others, provide public service to the community, and help create a more sustainable world. As we commit to the common good, we should seek to apply the knowledge and skills of our students and faculty to better human conditions. These are some of the powerful reasons we have invited Father Alejandro Solalinde to come to our campus. So now we can learn from his experiences and the vast knowledge he has acquired from years advocating and defending the human rights of thousands of refugees that have moved from their hometowns through painful experiences and are confronting and facing an unknown and often hostile world. So it is an immense pleasure to us to have you here visiting us. The Latin American Studies program in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and the campus ministries welcome you, and we highly appreciate your visit and your willingness to share with us what you know and what you have experienced. So now I'm just going to leave you with Professor Raúl Diego Rivera from the Spanish department, and I think I forgot to say my name. I'm Cristina Soriano from the History department, and I'm also the Director of Latin American Studies. So welcome. I hope you enjoy our conversation tonight.
Hello, welcome, bienvenidos. My name is Raúl Diego Rivera Hernandez. I am a faculty in the Department of Romance Languages. I'm a core faculty of Latin American Studies. And I want to say thank you, first of all, to Cristina Soriano for supporting this event. Without her support, it was going to be very difficult to bring Alejandro Solalinde, so gracias, Cristina. I want to say thank you to Irene Rivera. I'm not sure if she's here, from Campus Ministry. I just want to let you know that Father Alejandro Solalinde is staying in our monastery at Villanova University, so they're hosting Alejandro Solalinde for this week because he's going to be joining us in multiple events. So thank you to Villanova University Monastery, thank you to Campus Ministry, and thank you to the people of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences who helped us to organize this wonderful conversation with Alejandro. So as a Mexican scholar of literature and culture, it's a pleasure to be here with one of the leading figures of the human rights defense in Mexico, the US, and I would say Latin America and even Europe. José Alejandro Solalinde Guerra was born in March 1945 in Texcoco, Mexico. He is a Catholic priest who has been fighting for the rights of migrants for over the past 12 years. Solalinde has received bachelor's degrees in history and psychology from the Autonomous University of Mexico State, as well as a master's in systemic family therapy. In 2007, he established the migrant shelter Hermanos en el Camino, Brothers in the Road, in Ixtepec, Oaxaca. Brothers in the Road provides humanitarian aid, and with this I mean food, shelter, medical, psychological, and legal help to migrants from Central America, as well South America, Asia, and Africa. Since 2007, Solalinde has been denouncing and defying the abuses committed against undocumented migrants by corrupt officials and criminals that kidnap, rape, and extort these vulnerable populations. His activism has brought him into serious peril, and state and non-state actors have threatened his life on numerous occasions. Solalinde is a controversial figure for both Mexican national politics and traditional Catholic Church circles, and a celebrity among transnational human rights advocates. Solalinde was the recipient of the 2012 Human Rights Prize, awarded by the Mexican National Commission of Human Rights. In 2007, he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and this year, just a few months ago, he received the Guggenheim Dutch Award for his work at the shelter Hermanos en el Camino. Called the Oscar Romero of the migrants by many Central Americans, Solalinde's theology is rooted in seeking justice for the most vulnerable of society, and he believes that migrants, quote, are changing the world with their presence. Por favor, un aplauso para Alejandro. So let me explain you the dynamic of our conversation. We're going to have a conversation in English, and Alejandro is going to be responding in Spanish. We're going to be using two of our greatest interpreters. I'm going to present them on this side, Sofia Hernandez, who's the director of the Mentors Program, and in the other side, Sara Baranik, who's a wonderful lawyer, a graduate student lawyer, who has been working for many years in our law school clinics. We have 5 law school clinics, and our students from the Spanish program work really closely with students of law and their faculty, helping with interpretation and conducting also interviews from Spanish to English, English to Spanish, and traducing legal documents for people who are seeking asylum in the United States, and for farm workers that have been suffering different kind of struggles in their working environments. So we work very closely with the law school, and we're very happy to host also this event with 2 of the greatest interpreters that we have. So before we start with our conversation, we're gonna show an 8-minute video, 8 minutes and 30 seconds, just to give you an idea what's the context that we're gonna be discussing tonight. Welcome y bienvenidos.
Sí. Nos sentamos allá para...
Standing at the border between Guatemala and Mexico. Up there on the bridge, there's a normal border crossing with migration people stamping passports. But you go down these wobbly stairs, you notice that right under the bridge, these guys are trafficking people across the border, technically illegally.
You can't tell that there's been an immigration crackdown here, but there has, and it was the U.S. that paid for it.
These guys are doing it under the noses of immigration officials who clearly don't care that much.
You only start to feel this crackdown when you start moving north, where you run into a new network of military infrastructure and checkpoints meant to stop migrants. But this crackdown was never meant to keep Central Americans out of Mexico. It was meant to keep them out of Texas. In 2014, the United States sent an influx of money to Mexico, helping them militarize and fortify their southern border region. To understand why, you have to look at this chart. The red line represents the number of Mexican migrants apprehended while they're crossing into the United States, and the green line is for non-Mexican migrants. Look at 2014. That's when the number of non-Mexican migrants outnumbered Mexican migrants for the very first time. What pushed this number up were the migrants coming from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And these people fleeing from Central America aren't just looking for jobs. They're running away. So there's a war going on in Central America right now. It's actually not just one war, it's a ton of micro wars.
Unbelievable violence.
Nearly one homicide an hour.
3 of the 5 highest homicide countries in the world: Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador.
Carved up the city into warring factions.
Una doña que tenía un negocio, le quitaron así, mira, 4 dedos, porque no pagó en el momento el impuesto.
Residents of these towns are at major risk of dying, and so people are fleeing. While riding with the U.S. Border Patrol on the Texas border, I watched them apprehend a 22-year-old and his son as they just made the 3-week journey up through Mexico from Honduras.
Me han amenazado de muerte. Porque mi hijo y yo corremos peligro en mi país. No puedo regresar a mi país porque me han amenazado de muerte. Con mi hijo.
These refugees walk into Mexico mostly hoping to make it to the U.S.
Y la verdad yo necesito que me apoyen aquí. Por eso uno viene hasta acá para que le ayude.
Many come here to this town called Tapachula, just north of the border, where they can look for a migrant shelter to lie low and get support. And at this vulnerable point in their journey, many don't want to show their face on camera.
And there were these threats just constantly came to me. And then one day I just said, the hell with this, I'm gone. Mm-hmm. I burned my little rancho and I took off at 2 o'clock in the morning.
The exodus out of Central America came to a head in 2014, when the U.S. saw a huge spike in the number of Central American kids and teens arriving to the border without a parent.
It is a huge humanitarian crisis on the border right now.
52,000 unaccompanied children have been caught at the U.S. border with Mexico, double the number recorded last year.
Children from Honduras traveling into Guatemala, then Mexico, crossing the Rio Grande, and just now arriving in Texas.
As soon as it became clear that this year's migration to the border was different than in past years, I directed FEMA to coordinate our response at the border.
Obama declared an urgent humanitarian situation at the border. He discussed it with Mexican President Peña Nieto. Peña Nieto walked away from that meeting and immediately implemented a policy called the Programa Frontera Sur, the Southern Border Program.
And earlier this week, Mexico announced a series of steps that they're going to take on their southern border to help stem the tide.
For Peña Nieto, the plan had 2 main objectives.
Uno, proteger y salvaguardar los derechos humanos de los migrantes que ingresan y transitan por México. Y 2, incrementar el desarrollo y la seguridad de la región.
In short, the plan was supposed to make life better and safer for both migrants and those living in the border region, which includes Mexico's most impoverished state, Chiapas. This migrant protection plan for the southern border had been in the works for years, but it was rushed into implementation, apparently in response to American pressure. Many of the long-term plans that were meant to give migrants legal support and protection fell away. Instead, the implementation focused almost entirely on enforcement and security.
What's easiest to do, I think, is enforcement, because you already have the infrastructure set up. Like, it's harder to create jobs, right, than it is to hire more immigration agents and detain people.
Mexico's quick solution to this was to militarize, to start raiding buses, to start putting up checkpoints, to start cracking down on Central Americans who were coming into their country. A perfect symbolic representation of this are these huge multi-agency complexes that they built in order to house the immigration officials alongside the Army and the Marines and the federal police in the southern border region. And to help in the effort, the U.S. sent an influx of money and equipment, using resources from an existing security partnership it had with Mexico dating back to 2007. This partnership was originally created to combat drug trafficking and organized crime. The money was used here for things like inspection equipment, canine teams, observation towers, training for immigration enforcement officials, communication networks to support enforcement activities, and geared to collect biometric data like fingerprints and photos of detained migrants. In short, the U.S. helped militarize the southern border region of Mexico. The U.S. got what it was looking for.
In part because of strong efforts by Mexico, including at its southern border. We've seen those numbers reduced back to much more manageable levels.
Apprehensions on the Mexican side went up, and people arriving to Texas or other parts of the U.S. border went down. But this was all temporary. The number jumped back up in 2016. So the crackdown isn't actually stopping people from getting to the United States, but it is making their journey much more dangerous.
Behind me is the train that Central Americans take to get from here in southern Mexico up to the border with the United States. If it were 2014, this area would be completely packed with migrants.
Migration officials targeted this train. They started conducting extensive raids, and the train companies hired guards, increasing the speeds of the trains and installing concrete posts and walls to make it harder for people to jump aboard. And now gangs are a constant threat to the few travelers that remain. Here are the main routes that migrants took to get to the United States. They mainly followed the train routes. These paths were well supported with migrant shelters and clinics, and most importantly, large groups of other migrants, making it less likely that people will be robbed or assaulted. Migrants often don't know where their next meal will come from or where they're going to sleep each night. They depend on this network of usually church-sponsored shelters as they move north. The 2014 crackdown targeted these routes, looking for migrants in popular places like shelters and train stops.
Ya aquí en la esquina de la casa, ahí los están esperando por a veces la migración.
Hoy es crítico eso, hoy no hay entrada, ¿sí? La migra lo ve a un inmigrante y automáticamente lo deportan.
So migrants moving north have shifted into unfamiliar, unsupported routes that multiply the dangers that they are already subject to on this journey.
Hay que rodear por cerro, por los policías de la aduana, como es monte, entonces le pueden salir ladrones o es peligroso.
Pushing these refugees away from well-trodden routes and into the shadows has made them more vulnerable to assaults by criminals and gangs in this region.
Okay, so we're going to stop here because we want to have a conversation with Alejandro Solalinde about his work at the shelter. So we can switch on the lights. Perfect, gracias. Okay, so. Muy bien. So what we're going to do, I'm going to be asking the question in English, and they're going to be helping with interpretation, and Alejandro's going to be responding in Spanish, and then consecutively, Sofia and Sara are going to be helping with the interpretation. So Alejandro, my first question is, when and why did you start working with Central American migrants in transit through Mexico? Tell us about your shelter, Brothers in the Road.
Que escucho los dos y no me quedo con ninguno.
I listen to both and I can't hear either.
Bueno, antes de estar, ¿se oye bien?
Before I start answering, can you hear well?
Yo quisiera, si me permiten, hacer
Before I start, I would like to make a small presentation of my person.
Sí, porque
Because we did have a presentation of who I am, but I really want you guys to be clear about who's talking to you.
Porque
Because we're talking about, like, the theme of this talk is the crisis. Because as like a general frame about this entire conversation,
desde el siglo pasado a este comienzo del siglo XXI,
because from the last century to the last half of the last century to this century, century 21,
hay cambios importantes.
There's very important changes.
Y hay actores.
And there's actors.
Y quizá el principal.
And perhaps the symbol, the main symbol of this are the migrants.
¿Quién soy yo en medio de todo esto?
And then who am I in the middle of all of this?
¿Quién les está hablando en este momento?
Who is talking to you right at this moment?
Yo me quiero autodefinir.
I want to define myself with 3 lines.
La primera,
The first one is I am a witness of the changes.
después del Concilio Vaticano,
Because I had to live after the Second Vatican Council.
y los superiores
And the superiors that I had told me that I shouldn't change, that I should always be changing.
entonces yo soy un testigo en general.
And I am a witness of the change in the church and of the world itself.
Fui preparado para ir cambiando.
I was born and raised to be able to handle the changes and to keep changing.
Entonces soy un testigo de los cambios, pero soy también un agente de cambio.
And I am a witness of the changes, but I'm also an agent of the changes.
El otro factor que yo quiero decirles es que soy un buscador de los seres humanos, un investigador de los seres humanos.
The other factor that I want to talk to you about is that I am a searcher of changes of human rights.
Alguien que está rastreando el ser humano
Someone who's following humans
y que lo está tratando de entender profundamente.
and who's trying to understand them profoundly.
Todos mis estudios giran en torno a esta.
All of my studies surround this search.
Los he estudiado y rastreado desde la filosofía,
I have studied and searched for them from the philosophy,
desde la teología,
from the theology,
desde la historia,
from the history,
desde la.
from the psychology.
Para mí no hay nada más fascinante en el mundo.
For me, there's nothing that's more fascinating than a human being.
Esto me ha llevado a concebir familia.
And this has led me to understand it as my family.
Yo concibo a la gente no por nacionalidades o fronteras o por razas.
I see people not by their nationality or by borders or by their race.
Para mí toda la gente, todo el mundo es mi familia.
For me, everyone, all the people is my family.
Y es la única familia.
And is the only family, human family.
El tercer factor que me define
The third factor that defines me is faith.
no es lo mismo.
It's not the same reading into reality from faith than without it.
Hay personas admirables y muy doctas, pero si les falta la fe, es importante para leer globalmente.
There's people who you can admire. There's people who are very smart and very educated. However, if their faith is lacking, it's different.
Mi vida sin la fe no se entiende.
My life without faith is not understandable.
Entonces, el que les está hablando es una persona que está consciente de estar participando de crisis mundial.
And then the person who's talking to you is someone who's conscious about the world crisis,
En la que mi querida iglesia también está metida en la crisis.
in which my dear church is really in the crisis.
Entonces, lo más valioso que yo les puedo decir,
And the most valuable thing that I can tell you,
como resultado de todas estas experiencias,
as a result of all of these experiences and all the readings of this reality,
es mi visión.
is my vision.
Yo no sé leer fragmentadamente.
I don't know how to read in fragments.
La gente puede quedarse analizando un aspecto de la realidad.
People can stay reading and analyzing a part of reality,
Mi visión es muy amplia
when my vision is very big.
y es a lo que yo aspiro al contestar estas preguntas.
And is what I aspire to do while answering these questions.
En esta pregunta, entiendo que me están
In this first question, I think they're asking me about my shelter.
Pero, ¿cómo nació este albergue?
But how was this shelter born?
Nació de la necesidad de poder responder a los migrantes que llegaban a Ixtepec, donde yo vivo.
It was born from the necessity of the people who were migrating and who were in Ixtepec, where I live.
De repente me encuentro con ellos.
In a moment, I find myself with them.
Y me pregunto quiénes son.
And then I ask myself, who are they?
¿De dónde vienen?
Where are they coming from?
¿Por qué salen?
Why are they leaving?
¿Y por qué peligros?
And what dangers are they going through?
¿Y a dónde van?
And where are they going?
¿Y por qué van?
And why are they going?
Al norte.
To the north.
Como si tuvieran un chip.
Like if they had a chip.
El norte, el norte, el norte.
North, north, north.
Yo decía, durante muchos años entender esto, pero lo primero que hice fue hacer un espacio de protección.
For many years, I tried to understand this, but the first thing I did was to make a space for protection. Hermanos en el camino, or brothers on the route.
Primero, asistencial, responder a las necesidades más.
First, to assist in the most basic needs.
Pero después, empecé.
But afterwards, I started hearing them.
Y al oírlos, profundas y muy importantes.
And by listening to them, I started reading into things that were deeper.
A través de ellos, me fui dando cuenta lo que pasaba en su lugar de origen.
Through them, I started realizing what was happening in their place of origin.
Y lo que les hacían.
And what they were in Mexico.
Y a dónde iban.
And where they were going.
Entonces, nació.
And then Hermanos en el Camino was born.
Desde Hermanos en el Camino hemos ido haciendo también.
From Hermanos en el Camino, we made the incidents towards what we were able to do next.
Alejandro, in the last few years, we have been not talking only about migrants, but also as refugees. Can you explain us why we're switching the language from migrants to Central American refugees?
Oh, sorry.
Un poco más arriba.
Empieza a hablar y de ahí veremos.
Acomodar.
No, arriba. Más arriba.
No sé. A ver. ¿Ahí? ¿Sí? Bueno. Bien. Fíjense que las palabras quieren decir mucho.
Words can say a lot.
Cuando hablamos de migrantes,
when we talk about migrants,
esta expresión sale de las legislaciones.
This expression comes from the legislations.
Esta palabra migrante no es aceptada por varios gobiernos en este momento.
This word migrant is not accepted by a lot of places, like by the government.
En cambio, refugiados sí.
In change, refugee is.
¿Por qué? Porque los refugiados son personas que huyen por la violencia.
Why? Because refugees are people who run away from violence.
Son los expulsados extremos.
They are the extreme who leave.
Ante los cuales las naciones no se pueden negar.
Under which nations cannot deny.
Y pueden salir por cuestiones políticas.
And they could leave because of politics.
O de extrema violencia.
Or because of extreme violence.
Pero todas las demás categorías no son aceptadas.
But any other category is not accepted.
Y les voy a contar una anécdota.
And I'm going to tell you a small anecdote.
Porque en estos términos hay una trampa de los gobiernos y del sistema capitalista para no atender a los migrantes.
Because within this term, there's a small trap to not be able to help all the migrants.
En 2017,
in 2017,
yo estuve nominado y fui finalista al Premio Nobel de la Paz.
I was nominated and was a finalist for the Nobel Prize for Peace.
No se lo digo por eso. No.
I wasn't saying it for that.
No. En octubre yo estuve en Europa.
In October, I was in Europe.
Y estuve en un auditorio de la ONU en Viena.
And I was in an auditorium of the United Nations in Vietnam.
Y luego yo tenía una cita en Bruselas, Bélgica.
And then I had a date in Brussels, in Belgium.
Gracias, por favor.
Okay.
Sorry. Soy más libre ahora.
He's free now.
Y entonces, fíjense, yo tuve una palomita en la ONU.
And then I went and I had this little bird in the United Nations.
En Viena.
In Vietnam.
Ahí me porté muy bien.
I behaved.
Y también el pleno de la ONU se portó muy bien conmigo.
And all the United Nations were really nice to me.
Pero fíjense, tenía que pasar otra prueba muy importante.
However, I had to go through a very important test.
En Bruselas yo tenía que entrar en diálogo con 20 de los 28 países de la Unión Europea.
In Brussels, I had to come into dialogue with 20 of the 28 people who form the Union of Europe.
Y me acompañaron 2 mujeres, como ahora, gracias a Dios.
And 2 women, like right now, accompanied me.
De Amnistía Internacional.
From International Amnesty.
Y podíamos decir que me aleccionaron de lo que yo tenía más o menos que decir.
And they helped me to figure out what I had to say.
Y ellas estaban más o menos tranquilas de lo que yo me iba a portar bien.
And they were so okay with how I was going to behave.
Pero llegamos al primer filtro antes de hablar con el pleno.
But then we came to this first filter before talking to everyone.
Y me atiende un diplomático italiano, Aldo della Riccia.
And then an Italian diplomat with me.
Aldo della Riccia.
Aldo della Riccia.
Con 2 diplomáticos españoles.
With 2 Spanish diplomats.
Representantes de la Unión Europea ante Centroamérica y México.
Representatives of the European Union with Mexico.
Y me dicen, bienvenido padre Solalinde.
Welcome, Solalinde.
Ya saben esos rollos. Es un honor que usted esté aquí.
You know how they went, like, it's an honor that you're here.
Y yo le dije, mire, señor Aldo de la Richa, usted como diplomático, yo le quiero hacer varias preguntas.
And I told him, diplomat Aldo de la Richa, I want to ask you certain questions as a diplomat.
La primera.
The first.
La ONU ha aceptado y acepta a los migrantes como trabajadores internacionales.
The United Nations accepts migrants as international workers.
Y de hecho, cada determinado periodo examinan a mi país en el examen periódico universal.
And actually, they test my country in the national test.
Sobre el comportamiento de México ante los trabajadores internacionales migrantes.
About how Mexico is working with migrant workers who are international.
Y yo le dije, ¿Europa acepta a los migrantes como trabajadores internacionales?
Europe accepts migrant workers as international?
Y dice, no.
And he said, no.
Y le digo, entonces, ¿qué es lo que acepta de ellos?
And then I asked, what do you accept from them?
Solamente acepta a los migrantes como refugiados.
They said they only accept migrants as refugees.
Y le dije, ¿por qué? Si son trabajadores.
And I asked why, if they are workers.
Y me contesta, no, los trabajadores son como un fantasma, no existen para la legislación europea.
And they said, no, migrant workers are like ghosts. They don't exist for the European legislation.
Y yo le dije, déjeme decirle, señor de la Richa, que en México esos fantasmas generan $27,000 millones.
And And I told him, let me tell you, Sir de la Liche, in Mexico, these migrant workers help fund $27 million.
Es decir, los mexicanos en Estados Unidos con las remesas.
Let's say they help tax and fund all of the U.S. All of Mexico, sorry.
Y le dije, una segunda pregunta. ¿La Unión Europea puede defender los derechos humanos de las personas migrantes en gobiernos como México?
And I said, another question. Can the European Union help migrants with their rights?
Le dije, porque me queda claro que la Unión Europea defiende los derechos humanos, pero no de los migrantes.
Because I said that it's clear to me that the European Union defends human rights, but not the human rights of migrants.
Y le pregunté, Europa, la Unión Europea puede mandar una nota de protesta por ante México por el atropello a los derechos humanos de las personas migrantes?
And I asked, can Europe or the European Union send a letter to defend human rights of those migrants in Mexico?
Y dijo, no, la Unión Europea no puede hacer eso.
And he said, no, the European Union cannot do that.
¿Por qué no?
Why not?
Porque los intereses económicos son muy grandes que tienen con México.
Because the economic interests that they have with Mexico are too big.
Entonces yo le dije, señor de la Liche, ya entendí muy bien.
Oh, de la Liche, sir. Now I understand.
Europa está en
Europe is in a slow decadence.
Y no tiene calidad.
And they have no moral quality.
No puede decir al gobierno reclamar porque ella misma no respeta los derechos humanos de las personas migrantes.
And they can't help another country claim the rights because they themselves don't defend or claim the rights of their people.
Así terminamos esa conversación.
And that's how we ended that conversation.
Y entonces pasé al pleno.
And then I continued with the forum.
Y ahí me esperaban 20 representantes de países de la Unión Europea.
And that's where 20 representatives of 20 members of the European Union waited for me.
¿Saben ustedes cómo iba yo?
You can imagine how I was going there.
Como agua para el chocolate.
Like water for chocolate.
Y entonces llego y empiezo a decirles todo lo que yo le había dicho al señor Aldo de la Dica.
And then I started telling them all that I had said to Sir de la Liche.
Los representantes pelaban los ojos.
The representatives were just staring at me.
Todo eso.
I told them all of that.
Nadie aplaudió cuando terminé.
No one applauded when I finished.
No hicieron ninguna pregunta.
They did not ask any question.
Porque además, ¿saben cómo cerré?
Because do you know how I closed it?
Yo dije que Europa hace todo eso con los migrantes. Europa no tiene autoridad moral para dar premios.
Then I said if Europe is doing all of this to their migrants, then Europe has no moral right to do this.
Yo nada más les vi la cara. Una cara de extrañeza.
I looked at them with a strange face.
Y yo entre mí dije, acabo de perder el Nobel.
And I told myself, I just lost the Nobel Prize.
Y efectivamente lo perdí.
And clearly, I lost it.
Pero yo me sentí liberado.
But I felt myself liberated.
Porque para mí era más importante hablar desde mi corazón, recibir un premio de alguien que no puede, no tiene autoridad para dar.
Because for me, it was more important to talk truth than to receive a prize from someone who doesn't defend the rights.
Eso contesta la pregunta, ¿por qué refugiados sí y por qué migrantes no?
And this answers the question of why migrants yes, and why migrants no, and why refugees yes.
Porque es una trampa legal de términos para negar los derechos humanos de las personas migrantes.
Because it's a legal trap to deny the rights of human rights to people.
Well, I have to confess that after spending 2 days with Alejandro, when I ask a question, these things happen. So, Alejandro, I want to ask you, you have also coined a very important term in Mexican politics and discussions on immigration. You have spoken about the Central American Holocaust, el Holocausto Centroamericano. Can you explain us what do you mean with that striking expression?
Fíjense que yo empecé a hablar de este término porque voy haciendo la lectura muy amplia. A ver, el holocausto es un sacrificio.
Well, I started with this term because I was taking a broader view of everything. If you look at the term Holocaust,
es un sacrificio
it's a sacrifice.
Humano.
It's a human sacrifice.
Desde el poder.
And it's from above, from the powers above.
Esto podemos verlo claramente en Alemania con Hitler.
We can clearly see this in Germany with Hitler.
Es un genocidio.
It's a genocide.
Pero han pasado los años.
But as the years have passed,
y ahora podemos ver que el poder actual es el sistema capitalista.
And we can see that the actual power is the capitalistic system.
Los poderes fácticos capitalistas. Los poderes fácticos capitalistas son el nuevo poder. Sí, son ellos los que mandan a los gobiernos.
Those are the powers that run the governments.
Estos poderes mandan a Donald Trump.
Those are the powers that command and run Donald Trump.
Entonces, fíjense, el sistema capitalista, más agua.
If you look, it's the capital system. Look, more water. I have water here, water there. Here, water as well.
Pero no quiero tomarla.
But I don't want to drink it.
Entonces, fíjense, este sistema capitalista
so if you pay attention, this
está provocando las migraciones.
Is the thing that's provoking migration.
Con todas las acciones que hace en cada paso.
With all of the actions that every step is taking.
Y les pongo un ejemplo.
I'll give you an example.
Donald Trump en este momento le va a quitar la ayuda económica a Centroamérica.
Donald Trump in this moment is going to take away the economic support from Central America.
Pues en lugar de detenerla va a provocar más migración forzada.
But instead of stopping migration, it's actually going to cause more forced migration.
Entonces, estas vidas se están sacrificando en todo el mundo.
So these lives are being sacrificed all over the world.
Son miles de africanos los que están muriendo en el mar Mediterráneo.
There's thousands of Africans that are dying in the Mediterranean Sea.
O en la frontera con Ceuta y Melilla.
Or on the border with
procedentes de Marruecos. En Marruecos, la gente de África que quiere pasar a Europa.
Ceuta y Melilla, in the border with Ceuta y Melilla.
Entonces, pero también en México.
But also in Mexico.
¿Ustedes tienen idea de todas las personas que han muerto en México los últimos 15 años?
You have no idea how many people have died in Mexico for the last 15 years.
Nadie lo sabe.
No one knows.
Nada más, por ejemplo, en una sola forma de explotar, ¿qué son los secuestros?
For example, one way of exploiting people is by kidnapping them.
Sabemos que han sido 10,000 secuestros cada 6 meses.
We know that there have been about 10,000 kidnappings every 6 months.
Hay muchísimos desaparecidos. Mi colectivo ha contado más de 11,000 migrantes desaparecidos.
There have been thousands of these disappearances. My group has counted at least 11,000 disappearances.
Así, contados caso por caso.
Counting them case by case.
El movimiento migrante mesoamericano,
the Mesoamerican movement of migrants,
que son los que acompañan las caravanas de las madres que buscan hijos perdidos,
those who accompany the mothers of disappeared persons,
han contado más de 75,000 desaparecidos.
Have counted more than 75,000 disappeared migrants.
Si ustedes tienen la curiosidad de ver en internet las fosas en México, van a ver toda la República Mexicana llena de fosas.
If you want to look online to see the different graves, unmarked graves in Mexico, you can see that all of Mexico is covered with them.
La mayor parte son de migrantes.
And the majority of them are migrants.
Y créanmelo que va a ser imposible contarlos.
And believe me, it will be impossible to count them.
Esto es un holocausto.
This is a Holocaust.
Esto es un genocidio.
This is a genocide.
¿En aras de qué? De una economía, de un sistema económico que piensa que es más importante el dinero y el mercado que la gente.
Driven by an economic system that thinks that the most important thing is the money, more than people.
Y no me lo han preguntado, pero Pero también yo fui el primero que empecé a decir que estos flujos migratorios que llamaban caravana son un éxodo.
And you haven't asked me, but I'll just tell you anyways, that I was the first one to describe these groups of people that were coming, these flows of caravans, as exodus.
¿Y saben por qué lo digo?
And do you know why I say that?
Porque leyéndolo desde mi fe,
Because reading it from the point of view of my faith,
yo puedo ver sin ninguna dificultad
I can see without any difficulties
que las personas migrantes están saliendo de verdaderas situaciones de esclavitud.
I can see that those people, the migrants, are leaving real situations of
En
slavery
su propia tierra,
in their own lands
por las oligarquías,
because of oligarchy,
por gobiernos corruptos,
because of corrupt governments,
represores.
and because they're being repressed.
Han tenido que salir para salvar su vida.
They've had to flee to save their lives.
Ellos no salen por gusto.
They don't leave just because they like it.
En el camino, ese mismo sistema también los agrede y los extermina.
On their same journey, the same journey will kill them and take advantage of them.
Yo conozco muy bien la fe de las personas migrantes.
I know very well the faith of these people.
Es uno de los grandes valores que ellos tienen.
It's one of the great values that they have.
Ellos tienen una fe muy grande en Dios.
They have a great faith in God.
Fíjense, ellos jamás culpan a Dios de nada.
Look at this, that they never blame God for anything.
Y ellos tienen una esperanza como de una tierra prometida.
And they have faith in a promised land.
Que ellos piensan equivocadamente que es Europa o Estados Unidos.
And they think incorrectly that it's the United States or Europe.
Pero en realidad yo sí creo que sea una generación, un mundo venidero.
But in reality, I think that it's a generation and a world that's very vulnerable.
Y de hecho, esta crisis que vivimos y estos cambios profundos que estamos experimentando nos van a llevar a un nuevo humanismo.
But I think that this crisis and this world that we're living in is going to bring us to a new humanism.
Y uso un término religioso porque para mí el punto de llegada es esa vida que llamamos reino de Dios.
And I use the religious terms, because I think that where we're going, where we're trying to move towards, is the kingdom of God.
Y que es como una utopía, ¿verdad? La utopía de Jesús.
And it's
una utopía.
Oh, it's utopia. It's God's utopia. Sorry, everyone.
Don't worry. Gracias.
We have audience participation. So it's God's utopia. That's where we're going first.
We were talking a few hours ago in the train, and you were telling me that you spoke once with the canciller from Honduras, who was representing Honduran populations in Mexico. And you called them after speaking with a migrant to tell him that migrants have no place in their homelands because they're fleeing from violence. Migrants have no place in Mexico because they are experiencing kidnaps, they have been extorted, they have been disappeared. And migrants have no place here in the United States, as we have seen in contemporary politics. So it's like non-place and non-beings. Es como un no ser y no tener lugar. How can you talk about the new humanism if we're experiencing this non-existence?
Esta pregunta a mí se me hace muy profunda.
This is a really deep question.
Porque pudiéramos pensar así materialmente.
We could think of the immaterial.
Que se trata solamente de personas que no pudieron estar en un lugar.
We could think of the material that it talks about people who can't be in one place.
Y que están buscando otro lugar.
And they're just looking for another place.
Pero no es eso.
But it's not that.
Hay que leer un poco más.
You have to read a little deeper.
Para mí es el punto de partida.
So for me, it's the point where they're starting.
En la que estamos dejando una manera de ser de la humanidad.
And it's where we're leaving a way of being for humanity.
Estamos dejando una etapa.
We're leaving an era.
Todas y todos.
All of us.
Estamos en un gran cambio.
We're in a great change.
Si ustedes quieren, podemos llamarle que dejamos la modernidad.
If you want, we can call it that we left modernity behind.
Si quieren, pueden decir que estamos dejando el posmodernismo.
You can even say that we're leaving behind postmodernism.
Y que estamos viviendo en no sé qué rayos más.
And we're living in, I don't even know what it is.
Pero estamos dejando algo, ¿están de acuerdo?
But we're leaving something. Are you in agreement?
Cuando los migrantes están dejando cosas, están dejando algo muy profundo.
Think about it. When migrants leave everything, they're leaving something that's very
Yo
deep.
siempre creí que las mujeres eran como las que conservan la cultura y la fe.
I always believed that women were the ones who conserved the culture and the faith,
La vida familiar,
the
las
family
costumbres.
life and customs,
Y que ellas son lo más estable.
and that women were the most stable.
Pero qué impresión me ha causado ver que las mujeres de Centroamérica están saliendo también.
But it surprised me to see the way that women are leaving Central America as well.
Son las últimas en salir.
They're the last ones to leave.
Y me las quiero imaginar que están saliendo con todas sus raíces.
And I'm imagining that they're leaving and they're taking up all of their roots.
Y esto lo pude ver precisamente en 2014,
You could see that precisely in 2014.
cuando vi a una mujer hondureña garífuna de afrodescendiente
I saw that very clearly in 2014 when I saw a Garifuna woman from Honduras.
¿sí? La vi en Nueva York.
I saw her in New York.
Ella estaba con 3 niños
She was there with 3 children,
y traía un brazalete electrónico.
and she had an electronic monitoring bracelet
Y ella nos
or ankle
contó
bracelet.
que ella se aguantó lo más que pudo en el departamento de León.
She told me that she dealt with as much as she could living in the León department in Mexico.
De León, en
En
Honduras.
Honduras. En Honduras, sorry.
Porque ahí la gente de color, ahí está la gente de color, la mayor parte.
Because that's where the large portion of people of color are.
De su familia ya había salido su abuelo,
From her family, her grandfather had left,
salieron sus hermanos,
her brothers and sisters,
salió su esposo,
her spouse,
y ahora ella iba a buscar también una vida porque ahí ya no podía vivir.
and then she decided to leave to look for a better life because she couldn't live there anymore.
Ya no iba en busca de su esposo
She wasn't even going to search for
porque
her
hacía mucho
spouse,
tiempo ya no
her
se
husband,
comunicó con ella.
because he had stopped communicating with her a while ago.
Le habían quitado las maras 2 hijos
And the Maras, the gangs, had taken 2 children away from
y
her.
le quedaban 3 hijos pequeños.
And she had 3 small children.
Los garífunos son gente del mar,
The Garifunas are people of the sea.
gente del agua.
They're people of water.
Entonces ella pasó el río Bravo
So she passed by through
con
the
sus
Rio Bravo
3 hijos,
with her 3 children,
uno en brazos,
one of them in her
y
arms.
pasó el río.
And she passed through the river.
Cuando pasó el río se entregó.
When she passed through the river, she turned herself in.
Yo le pregunté, porque todavía traía su brazalete electrónico,
I asked her why she still had her electronic monitoring ankle thing on.
le dije, ¿cómo te sientes aquí?
I said, "How do you feel here?"
Y me dijo una sola palabra,
And she just said one word.
sobrevivo.
Well, I survived.
Y le dije, ¿y tu brazalete? Es como estar en la cárcel.
And I said, well, this ankle bracelet thing, it's like being in jail.
Sí, mis hijos me preguntan por qué yo traigo eso.
Yes, my children ask me why I wear that.
Porque ustedes saben que ella no puede salirse de un área
And they ask why I can't leave out of a certain
y
circumference.
tampoco puede trabajar.
And I can't even work.
No podía hacer nada.
I can't do anything.
Y entonces yo me imaginé a aquella mujer con todas las tradiciones, con toda su fe, con todas sus raíces, con toda su historia.
And so I imagine that woman with all of her roots, with all of her faith, with all of her culture, with all of her history.
Todo eso traía la mujer desde Honduras.
And all of that woman brought with her from Honduras.
Y ahora estaba en Nueva York.
And imagine, now she was there in New York.
Una hondureña, una garífuna en Nueva York.
Honduran, a Garifuna in New York.
¿Se imaginan toda esa planta que va a trasplantarse ahí en Nueva York?
Can you imagine that plant that's going to be planted there in New York?
Y toda esa vida que traen las mujeres de El Salvador, de Guatemala, de Nicaragua, de todos lados.
And all of the life that with these women from Guatemala, from Honduras, from Nicaragua, from all these places bring.
Es todo un cambio de vida.
It's a whole change in the way of life.
Entonces, en lo que dejaron ya no queda nada.
What they left, nothing remains behind.
Nosotros puede quedar la memoria histórica, pero algo muy importante ya cambió.
We can remember it in our historical memory, but something important has changed.
Esto es lo que debemos entender todas y todos.
And that's what we should all understand.
Estamos viviendo un momento de transición.
We're living in a moment of transition.
Y la verdad es que no sabemos a dónde vamos.
And the reality is we're not sure where we're going.
Yo platicaba con un grupo de muchachitos muy jóvenes de Honduras.
I chatted with a group of young people from Honduras.
Y yo les preguntaba en la casa de Saltillo, en Coahuila.
And I asked them in la casa
en el norte.
In the north, in Saltillo.
Les preguntaba yo, era un grupito como de unos 7 o 8 muchachitos muy jovencitos.
It was a group of 7 or 8 very young boys.
Y uno de ellos tendría como 16 años, yo creo.
Maybe one of them was like 16, I
Le
think.
dije, ¿cómo les ha ido en México?
I said, how has it been for you in Mexico?
Y él se puso rojo y empezó a llorar.
And he turned bright red and he started to cry.
Estaba conmocionado.
He was so moved.
Cuando ya le di tiempo, se repuso.
When I gave him time, he
y
took a
dijo,
break.
es que a 3 compañeritos que venían conmigo y a mí nos secuestraron.
And he said that 3 different people who had gone with him had been kidnapped.
Mi familia pudo pagar el rescate, pero mis compañeritos no.
My family could pay the rescue, but the rescue of my compatriots, they couldn't. And for sure, they've been killed.
Seguí platicando con los demás y habían tenido experiencias parecidas.
I continued talking to the rest of them, and they had also had similar experiences.
Y yo les dije, ¿y ahora a dónde van?
And I said to them, now where are you going?
Y me contestaron, a Estados Unidos.
And they said, to the United States.
Yo les dije, sus países de origen no fueron su lugar.
And I said, your countries of origin were not your places.
México tampoco es su lugar.
And Mexico is also not your place.
Porque ustedes no quieren quedarse aquí.
Because you don't want to stay here.
Y dijeron, no.
And they
Es
said,
el
no.
lugar de los secuestros.
They said, no, because this is the place of kidnapping.
Pero tampoco Estados Unidos los quiere.
But the United States also don't want.
Ahí tampoco los reciben.
The United States also is not going to receive them.
Ese mismo día yo le hablé al canciller de Honduras.
And that very day, I spoke with the Chancellor of Honduras.
Y le dije, canciller, pasó esto.
And I told him, Chancellor, this happened.
¿Cuál es el lugar de los hondureños?
Where is
¿Cuál
the
es su
place
lugar? Dígamelo.
for the Hondurans? Where is the place for the Honduran people?
Y no pudo contestarme.
And he couldn't answer me.
Yo sí sé ahora el lugar.
I now know the place.
Ese lugar es el futuro.
That place is the future.
No es Estados Unidos.
It's not the United
Y
States.
tampoco es Europa.
And it's not Europe.
Son las nuevas generaciones
It's the new generations
con el cambio que va a producir los migrantes.
with the changes that the migrants are going to produce.
Los migrantes son personas que tienen valores grandísimos.
Migrants have very great values.
Tienen la experiencia del dolor en sus lugares de origen.
They have experiences of pain in their places of origin.
Tienen el sufrimiento del camino.
They have the suffering of their journey.
La experiencia del camino.
They have the experience of their journey.
Ellos se saben migrantes que pasan como nosotros en la vida.
They know the experiences of migrants who have passed by.
Y en lo único que ellos no alcanzan a ver
And the only thing that they don't see
es el futuro.
is the future.
Ellos no alcanzan a ver que su futuro no es Estados Unidos o Europa.
They are not able to see that their future isn't the United States or Europe.
El futuro está en las generaciones venideras.
The future is in the generations to come.
Donald Trump no va a estar cuando veamos en las futuras generaciones a los migrantes de todos lados responsabilizarse de Estados Unidos.
Donald Trump is not going to be there in future generations when all of these different migrants from different places take responsibility for the United
Y
States
mejorar la vida de Estados Unidos.
and improve the life of the United States.
Estados Unidos ha sido siempre migrante.
The United States has always been a migrant.
Y Europa también.
And Europe as well.
¿Por qué no aceptar esta generación?
Why not accept this generation?
Que son las que tienen tantos valores.
This is the generation that has so many
Si ustedes
values.
se fijan, las migraciones de ahora no traen armas.
If you look at this, if you look at the way things are, the migrants of nowadays, they aren't bringing arms or guns.
No vienen a conquistar.
They're not coming to conquer.
Aunque ellos no lo sepan, vienen a transformar.
Although they don't know it, they come to transform.
Y este es a donde se encamina esta crisis que vivimos hoy.
And this is where the crisis is headed that we see today.
Well, I think we can do one more question because I can imagine the audience would like to. Well, we can take questions if that's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
I'd like to know if you agree with my reasons for blaming the United States for most of the misery in Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. I think of those three countries, and I think of Nicaragua. I think of autocratic governments in charge in all places. In every country, the people strive for democratic governments, for reform, to get rid of the autocrats. And the United States stopped that. The United States made them stay with the autocrats, with the oligarchs, with the dictators. However, in Sandinista Nicaragua, the reform movement largely succeeded. And that's why now very few people are coming here from Nicaragua, and many, many people are coming from the countries where the United States forced the old repression to remain in power. Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Do you agree with my reasoning about this?
Yo he dicho que, y esto permítame decirles que hace unos meses estuve en la embajada de Estados Unidos.
I've said, and allow me to tell you that a couple of months ago I was in the U.S. Embassy.
Y fui invitado por la embajada.
And I was invited by the embassy.
Porque querían conocer mi punto de vista sobre lo que estaba pasando con estas caravanas.
Because they wanted to know my point of view about what's happening with these caravans.
En ese momento, y creo que todavía ahora, no había embajador.
In that moment, and I think even now, there wasn't an ambassador.
Pero estaba un señor llamado John, encargado de negocios.
But there was a man named John in charge of business.
Y entonces, antes de que yo le dijera mi punto de vista, yo le pregunté a él.
So before I shared my point of view, I asked him.
Le dije, ¿a qué cree que se deba estas caravanas tan masivas, tan numerosas que no habíamos visto?
And so I asked him, what do you think is up with these large, numerous caravans coming up that we hadn't seen before?
Y me dijo, pues mire, padre Solalinde, es que, según me informan, se echaron a perder las cosas.
He said, oh, look, Padre Solalinde, Father, what I've heard, what they've told me, what they've been informed is that their coffee crops failed.
Y le empecé a decir, mire, ¿sabe por qué está saliendo tanta gente?
And I said to him, do you know why all these people are coming out?
Porque Estados Unidos ha destruido su mundo.
Because the United States has destroyed their world.
Estados Unidos es culpable de toda la violencia y la descomposición y el empobrecimiento de América Latina.
The United States is responsible for all of the poverty and the violence and the destruction of Latin America.
Yo le dije, Estados Unidos ha ocasionado 200 conflictos en América Latina.
I said the United States is responsible for 200 conflicts in Latin America.
Y le empecé a decir lo que Estados Unidos había hecho con Ríos Montt en Guatemala.
And I started to share what the United States had done in Guatemala with Ríos Montt.
Con Somoza,
en Nicaragua.
Con las oligarquías de Honduras.
With the oligarchies in Honduras.
Y la guerra con El Salvador.
And the war in El Salvador.
Le dije todo eso.
I told him all of that.
Entonces, Estados Unidos es el culpable.
And I told him, so the United States is the guilty one.
Y lo menos que puede hacer Estados Unidos es recibir a los migrantes.
And the very least that the United States can do is receive
la
migrants.
migración forzada fue ocasionada por Estados Unidos.
Because this forced migration was caused by the United States.
Yes.
Yo creo que Estados Unidos, como cualquier pueblo, pero este país es la primera potencia.
I think the United States, like any country, however, the United States is a big place.
Y como todo pueblo, como toda nación, tiene una misión.
And like any place, like any country, has one mission.
Que todavía no ha realizado.
That it has still to realize.
Y mira, yo puedo ver dos factores importantes que constituyen Estados Unidos.
And I can see two factors that are grounded in the United States.
Uno, los primeros migrantes que llegaron por Nueva Inglaterra.
First, the migrants that came from New England.
Que muchos de ellos han sido supremacistas.
Many of them who have been supremacists.
Y han ido exterminando propiamente a los indios desde Oriente hasta Occidente.
Who started eliminating the natives from the Occident to the Orient.
Tengo entendido que en este momento de la población de Estados Unidos solamente queda el 1.2% de indígenas.
And to my understanding, there's only 1 to 2% of natives still left in the United States.
Y sucede que estos supremacistas blancos son los que han dominado y gobernado Estados Unidos siempre.
And these white supremacists are the ones who have dominated the United States always.
Aquí gobierna el dinero.
Here, money is in charge.
Maneja la Asociación Nacional del Rifle.
Here, the rifles are in charge.
Aquí gobierna Wall Street.
Wall Street is in charge.
Aquí no hay democracia.
There's no democracy here.
No hay, porque no hay voto directo.
There's no democracy because there's no direct vote.
Aquí quien tiene dinero para hacer las campañas es el que tiene posibilidad de ganar.
Here, the people who have money to be in charge of the campaigns are the people who are able to win.
Este es el aspecto negativo de Estados Unidos.
This is the medium of the United States.
El aspecto positivo, para mí, son sobre todo las mujeres blancas solidarias.
For me, the positive aspect of the United States are the white women of the United States.
No supremacistas.
The solidary women, not the supremacists.
Y estas mujeres blancas las podemos ver luchando contra la esclavitud.
And we can see these white women fighting against slavery.
Y la vemos marchando en Selma.
And we see them marching in Selma.
Al lado de Martin Luther King.
In Selma, next to Martin Luther King.
Y las hemos visto marchando con César Chávez.
And we have seen them marching with Cesar Chavez.
Y yo las vi defendiendo a los migrantes.
And I saw them defending the migrants.
Cuando estaban esos niños enjaulados por Donald Trump,
when these children were in cages because of Donald Trump,
hubo mujeres blancas que iban con sus niños en carriola y otros cargando.
There were white women who went with their children in carriages and on them.
Con letreros solidarizándose con los migrantes.
With signs in solidarity with the migrants.
Fue algo increíble.
It was something incredible.
Ver cómo esas mujeres blancas solidarias llevaban a sus niños.
See how these white women in solidarity were carrying these signs with their children.
Para solidarizarse con los niños migrantes.
To be in solidarity with the migrant children.
Entonces, el otro aspecto que yo veo positivo y esperanzador.
Then the other positive aspect that I see that's really nice.
Son las nuevas migraciones que llegan a Estados Unidos.
Are the new migrants that are coming to the United States.
Asiáticas.
Asians.
Latinoamericanas sobre todo.
Latin Americans, of course.
Bueno, chinas también.
From China too.
Son migraciones que ya están entrando en un país organizado.
The migrants that are coming into a place which is organized.
Con un Estado de Derecho.
With a state of rights.
Yo pienso que serán la nueva alma de Estados Unidos.
I think they're going to be the new soul of the United States.
Entonces yo sí creo que Estados Unidos vaya a cumplir su misión.
And then I think the United States will achieve its mission.
Quiero permitirme un ejemplo que pasó en la historia.
I want to say an example that happened through history.
Cuando Atila llegó frente a Roma,
When Attila was in front of Roma,
se maravilló de la grandeza de Roma.
it was surprised by the incredibleness of Roma.
Y él pensó, ¿para qué destruir Roma si puedo aprovecharla yo?
And then it thought, why destroy Rome if I can take advantage of it?
Y dijo, venzamos, pero no destruyamos.
We can defeat, but we shouldn't destroy.
Perdón por la comparación. Los migrantes no son Atila.
Sorry for the comparison, but the migrants are not Attila.
Atila era un poderoso salvaje.
Attila was a very powerful savage.
Los migrantes son lo mejor de la humanidad en este momento.
The migrants are the best of humanity in this moment.
Y entonces, cuando se combinen estas personas solidarias blancas de Estados Unidos,
And then with combination of these white people in solidarity
con las nuevas migraciones,
with the new migrants,
podemos pensar en un país renovado que sí va a cumplir la misión ante el mundo.
we can see a new place that, yes, can achieve the mission of the world.
Y yo ya me lo estoy imaginando.
And I can already imagine it.
Yo sí lo voy a ver.
I will see it.
Ustedes, ¿quién sabe?
You guys, I don't know.
Do you have... yes.
Puedo preguntar en español.
Claro.
Es coherente preguntar en español.
No, can you give us, like, when you start asking the question in Spanish, can you give us some time to do interpretation? Gracias.
Me interesa la idea del nuevo humanismo.
I'm interested in this idea of the new humanism.
Y sobre todo la idea de la modernidad y dejar la modernidad o posmodernidad.
And especially leaving this modernism or postmodernism.
Todo bien que la modernidad se funda precisamente con la idea de quién es humano y quién no es.
Especially because modernism is founded in this idea of who is human and who is not human.
Mi pregunta es, ¿quién decide ahora quién es humano?
My question now is who decides who is human and who is not?
Mira, esa pregunta que tú me haces al final, de decir quién es humano y quién no,
That question that you're saying at the end of deciding who is human and who is not,
para mí se refiere a algo muy profundo,
for me it refers to something very deep
que quiere decir la identidad.
that wants to say the identity.
Quien tiene que decir quién es humano o no, no somos unos contra otros.
Who has to say who is human or not has nothing to do with each of us,
Sino nosotros mismos,
if not with ourselves,
a partir de una nueva identidad.
after a new identity.
El hombre de hoy está perdido
The man of today is lost
porque se ha apartado de Dios,
because he has steered away from God.
se ha conformado con el Dios de las religiones,
He has confirmed with the God of religion,
de las religiones oficiales, del Dios oficial.
with the official God of redemption,
O se ha quedado con el Dios en Gadwetrus, que es el dinero.
or has stayed with the God of money.
Y entonces, ese ser humano de ahora,
And now this human being of today,
como un signo de salir de esta crisis,
as a sign of trying to leave this crisis,
tendremos que volver al Dios de la vida,
has to go back to the God of life,
al Dios que es dueño de todo,
the God who's in charge of everything,
al Dios que acompaña nuestro peregrinaje por este mundo, nuestra migración.
the God that accompanies people in their journey.
Y fíjate, al aceptar, al volver a Dios verdadero,
And see, when we return to the true God,
yo no estoy hablando de religiones,
I'm not talking about religion.
vamos a volver a nosotros mismos,
We go back to ourselves
porque todas las demás cosas se van a acomodar.
because everything else just falls into place.
Vamos a reconocer entonces que somos lo más importante, nosotras y nosotros.
We recognize that we are the most important,
Y entonces sí podemos entrar en una búsqueda de una nueva identidad.
and then we could go into a search of a new true identity.
El nuevo humanismo tendrá que ser postcapitalista.
The new humanism has to be post-capitalist.
No puede ser capitalista,
It can't be capitalist
porque el capitalismo es un interruptor de la humanidad.
because capitalism stops and interrupts humanity.
Impide un nuevo humanismo.
It stops a new humanism.
Yo quiero imaginarme el nuevo humanismo gracias a las personas migrantes,
I want to imagine a new humanism thanks to the migrants
con una axiología muy simple.
with a simple sociology.
El Dios de la vida, como cada quien lo conciba,
The God of life, or however anyone wants to see it.
nosotros los seres humanos como lo más valioso,
Us human beings as the most valuable,
y las cosas materiales como medio para nuestra realización humana.
and the material things as a medium for our human realization,
Pero no individualistamente,
but not individualistic,
sino como una comunidad.
but as a community.
Lo que hizo la modernidad
What modernism did
fue empezar a hablarnos del valor de la persona humana.
was to start talking to us about the value of human beings.
Y lo hizo en 1789
And it did in 1789
con la Revolución Francesa,
with the French Revolution.
unidad, libertad, fraternidad.
Unity, fraternity, and liberty.
Y esto mismo lo hemos estado viviendo,
And this same thing we have been living.
pero un paso importante que hemos dado en la posmodernidad
But an important step that we have done in postmodernism
es el reconocimiento a la diversidad.
is recognizing diversity.
Siempre hemos sido diversos,
We've always been diverse,
pero el poder nos uniformó
but the power made us uniform,
y nos tomó como homogéneos.
and then it took us as homogeneous.
Si ustedes se fijan, la esencia del posmodernismo es la diversidad.
But if you see, at the essence of postmodernism is diversity.
La Iglesia Católica ha dicho, es un relativismo.
The Catholic Church has said it's relative,
No, es una diversidad.
but no, it's diversity.
Miren, yo lo puedo ver con ustedes, con cada una y con cada uno de ustedes.
And I can see it here with each one of you.
Es maravilloso. Cada uno de ustedes es un original.
It's wonderful. Each one of you is original.
Hermoso, por fuera y por dentro.
It's incredible. You guys are wonderful inside and out.
Entonces, el posmodernismo nos dice que somos un maremaño en crisis.
And then postmodernism tells us we are in crisis.
El nuevo humanismo nos tendrá que demostrar
The new humanism needs to demonstrate
que podemos estar unidos en la diversidad,
that we can be united in diversity
sin uniformarnos,
without making us uniform,
aceptándonos como somos,
accepting us how we are,
pero encontrando cosas comunes que sí nos puedan unir.
but finding common things that can make us united.
Y yo quiero decir dos cosas que dan sentido a la vida.
And I want to say two things that give life meaning.
En primer lugar, la fe,
In first place, faith.
que no es lo mismo que la religión.
That is not the same thing as religion.
La fe responde a una dimensión humana que es la espiritualidad.
Faith responds to a human dimension that is spirituality.
Y la otra cosa, buscar también cosas comunes a la solidaridad.
And the other thing is to look for common things in solidarity.
Nos estamos encaminando a un mundo maravilloso.
We are heading to a wonderful world.
De verdad, yo así lo veo, de la diversidad de tantas naciones y tantas jurisdicciones.
Really, this is how I see it, from the diversity of so many nationalities and so many places,
A un acuerdo mundial.
to a world agreement.
Cada país podrá conservar su identidad
Each country will be able to keep its identity
y abrir su cultura
and open its culture
y sin perder su ser,
without losing itself.
buscar lo que es común.
Search for what is common.
Verdaderamente convivir.
Truly live together.
En la conciencia de que, mira, nadie es dueño de nada.
Having behind their head and conscious that no one is in charge of anything.
Cuando compartimos un planeta que es nuestra casa.
When we share a world that is our home.
En este sistema capitalista es imposible pensar así.
In this capitalist system, it's impossible to think like this.
Porque está la exageración de la propiedad privada.
Because the exaggeration of private property.
Y hay tontos que se lo creen.
And there's dumb people who believe that.
Ahí está Donald Trump.
And there's Donald Trump.
Lo siento, pero él como magnate acumula riquezas.
him as the charge, he accumulates riches.
Y se desvive por tener más y más.
And he lives his life in order to get more and more.
Y yo les pregunto, ¿se va a llevar algo?
And then I ask you guys, is he going to take anything?
Lo que ya tiene, ¿no le alcanza para vivir toda su vida lo que le queda?
What he has isn't enough for him to live his entire life?
Entonces, en ese humanismo postcapitalista, esto no va a existir.
And this humanism post-capitalist, this will not exist.
La gente será sabia.
People will be wise.
Y entenderá que no somos dueños de nada.
And will understand that
que solamente usamos las cosas y las compartimos.
That we have things that we share.
Sabiamente. A ver, yo quiero imaginar que nuestro mundo es como un banquete, un buffet.
Sometimes I want to imagine that our life is like a banquet.
Yo pude ver en la UCLA, me parece, un buffet de estudiantes en la Universidad de la UCLA.
I want to imagine like in UCLA, a buffet of students.
Yo estaba bien amazed.
I was really amazed.
Porque nunca había visto un buffet así.
Because I had never seen a buffet like this.
Secciones de ensaladas, secciones de carnes, secciones de sopas.
Sections of salad, of soup, of meat.
Y lo que más me interesa en la vida, los postres.
And the thing that I'm most interested, the dessert.
Yo dije, ¿qué hago? ¿Qué puedo escoger aquí entre todo esto?
And then I asked myself, what do I do? What can I choose between all of these things?
Y bueno, dije, yo no soy bodega, yo no soy almacén.
And then I told myself, I am not like any place to store this.
Voy a probar algunas cosas de las que me gusten y lo demás lo voy a dejar.
I'm going to try some of the things that I think I like, and then everything else I'm just going to leave there.
¿Qué pasaría si yo intentara comer más de lo que yo puedo aceptar?
What would happen if I try to eat more than what I can accept?
Me enfermaría.
I would get sick.
Eso nos está pasando con todas las cosas de la tierra.
And that is what's happening to us with all the things that this land has to offer.
Estados Unidos es el país más desperdiciado de la tierra.
The United States is the country that wastes the most things.
Porque no acaba de entender que somos migrantes.
Because it doesn't stop to think that we are all migrants.
Y que al camino solamente se lleva lo necesario.
And that in the journey we only take what's necessary.
Más hay que dejarlo porque nos estorba.
Everything else we just have to let go because it bothers us.
¿Sí? Entonces ese posthumanismo va a ser precioso.
And this postmodernism, posthumanism will be wonderful.
Va a ser más libre y más fraterno.
Because it will be free and
¿Qué culpa tiene la Iglesia Católica?
How is the
¿Tiene de qué? ¿En qué?
the Catholic Church guilty? What are they guilty of?
Sí, nosotros soy indígena, soy migrante indocumentada y fui secuestrada en México.
I'm a person, I'm an indigenous person, and I was kidnapped in Mexico, and that is why I'm here.
Ahora trabajo con migrantes.
And I work with migrants.
Y me doy cuenta que nada pueden hacer, no quieren transformar su situación, porque todos dicen en la esperanza de Dios. Así solo Dios va a venir a arreglar el problema, no ellos.
And I see that they don't want to solve their problems because they say we just have to wait for God. God is going to come and solve all our problems.
Como indígena,
As a person who's indigenous, I remember the teachings of my grandmother who was Mayan. How they were oppressed and the way that they lived. Now I do not have a religion, but I remember the ways that the Mayans lived.
Déjenme decirles que la Iglesia Católica no son los obispos, ni es el Papa solamente.
Let me tell you that the Catholic Church is not the bishops and it's not just the Pope.
La Iglesia Católica somos todos los bautizados.
The Catholic Church is all of us who are baptized.
Pero los bautizados no decidimos.
But the baptism, we don't decide.
Deciden los de arriba.
It's decided from above.
En ese sentido sí tienen mucha responsabilidad.
And in that sense, there's a lot of responsibility that we
A
have
veces culpabilidad.
and a lot of guilt.
Porque, miren, desde hace muchos años, la Iglesia Católica, en sentido de la parte eclesiástica, la autoridad,
Look, for many years, the authority, the ecclesiastical authority,
se desvió hacia el poder y el dinero.
went towards power and money.
Y Jesús es muy claro al decir que el que a dos amos sirve, con alguno queda mal.
And Jesus was very clear in saying, if you serve two masters, something's going to go
La
wrong.
Iglesia ha optado por el poder y el dinero,
And if the church has gone for power and money,
y de hecho se convirtió en Estado.
and actually converted into a state,
El Papa es un
nation,
jefe de Estado,
and the Pope is the head of a nation state,
pues difícilmente puede acompañar a sus ovejitas de abajo,
then, well, it's very hard to accompany the little sheep below,
sobre todo los pueblos originarios.
in particular, the original people, First
Entonces,
Nations.
la Iglesia, la jerarquía, tiene que cambiar.
So the hierarchy of the church has to change.
Porque este joven maravilloso de Nazaret
Because this amazing young man from Nazareth
pensó en una iglesia,
thought of a church,
pero no como está ahora.
but not the way it is now.
La pensó con un movimiento
He thought of a church as a movement,
de cambio,
a movement of change,
como un promotor del humanismo,
like moving towards humanism.
basado en el Dios de la vida
He thought in the God of life
y la hermandad entre nosotros.
and the fraternity among all of us.
El mejor ejemplo es Jesús.
The best example is
El
Jesus.
problema es que no lo vivimos.
The problem is that we don't live it.
No lo vivimos. Yo puedo analizar mi iglesia actualmente.
I could analyze my church right
Yo
now.
la quiero mucho en lo personal.
I
la
love
verdad.
it personally,
Pero hay cosas que no acepto yo.
but there are things that I do not accept.
Y una de ellas es que se hayan desviado hacia ese poder y ese dinero.
And one of those things is that they've gone out of their way towards money and towards power.
Yo estudio mucho la historia de la iglesia.
I study the history of church,
Y estoy, fíjate, en contacto continuo con Jesús de los evangelios, del evangelio.
and I am in contact constantly with Jesus of the gospel.
Y esto me ha ayudado mucho a madurar mi fe.
And that has helped me to mature in my faith
Y a no ser esa iglesia cómplice del poder y del dinero.
and to not make the church complicit with this money and this power.
Yo puedo ser un cristiano libre,
I can be a free Christian,
maduro,
mature,
que le puede estar hablando de tú a mis queridos obispos
that can be speaking with different bishops
y reclamar lo que ellos no hacen.
and to complain and to bring up to them what they're not doing.
Y yo creo que todos debemos hacerlo también.
And I think that all of us should do that as well.
Debemos crecer,
We should grow
porque no somos súbditos,
because we are not subjects.
somos colegas de bautismo.
We are colleagues in baptism.
Y el mismo Vaticano II, el Concilio Vaticano II, nos dice que todos los bautizados tenemos la misma dignidad.
And Vatican II says that all of us who are baptized have the same dignity.
Esos títulos de monseñores y esas cosas se deben de acabar.
So those titles of Monsignor and all that, we
Que no
should get
somos
rid of
más que
them
hermanos.
because we're just all siblings.
Y la iglesia está en deuda con los pueblos originarios.
And the church is in debt to original
Sí.
peoples.
Está en deuda.
The church is in debt to First Nations.
We're going to allow just one more question. ¿Sí?
What's your opinion about what's happening on the U.S.-Mexico border?
Es algo muy curioso.
It's very curious.
Porque Donald Trump dice que es una emergencia,
Donald Trump says it's an emergency,
pero no hay tal emergencia.
but there's
No
not
hay.
an emergency.
La crisis humanitaria no está en la frontera.
The humanitarian crisis is not at the border.
Crisis humanitaria está en Centroamérica, que él provocó.
The humanitarian crisis is in Central America that he provoked.
Él está usando la gente que se está juntando en la frontera como una bandera electoral.
He is using people on the border as an electoral flag.
El muro mismo no sirve de nada.
The wall doesn't do anything.
Porque yo sé de muchas formas que están pasando.
Because I know many ways that people are passing.
Y te voy a dar un ejemplo.
I'll give you an example.
El 3 de octubre del año pasado arrancó el éxodo.
October 3rd, last year, the Exodus started.
Con las caravanas 1, 2 y 3.
With caravans 1, 2, 3.
Y entonces Donald Trump cerró en un momento la frontera.
So Donald Trump closed in one moment the border.
Y ha puesto guardias fronterizos.
And put border guards.
Y han pasado de ese tiempo para acá 90,000 personas.
And since that time, 90,000 people have passed.
Nada más en este año.
Just this year.
O sea, que si ellos siguen, podrían llegar hasta el 1,000,000 después al final de año.
So if they continue, we could get up to 1 billion this year.
¿Cómo explicar que cerrando la frontera y teniendo tantos miles de guardias fronterizos, la gente sigue pasando?
How is it that we have this border and there's all these border guards and people just keep passing through?
Porque hay una puerta secreta por donde pasan.
There's a secret door that they pass through.
Y esa puerta secreta se llama corrupción.
That secret door is called corruption.
Que hay del lado de México y del lado de Estados Unidos.
There's a side on the U.S. and there's a side on
Yo sé
Mexico.
muchas formas como ellos pasan.
I know many ways that they pass through.
Y van a seguir pasando.
And they're going to keep coming through.
No va a haber nada que impida que la gente siga pasando.
There's nothing that's going to stop people from continuing to pass through. Do you believe me?
Entonces, es una ingenuidad de parte de Donald Trump.
And so it's just disingenuous on Donald Trump's
Él
part.
no es tonto, él sabe que no puede detener el flujo migratorio.
He's not dumb. He knows that he cannot stop migration.
Pero sí le sirve como bandera electoral.
But it serves as an electoral flag or banner.
Well, thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Por coming.